Transferable skills.
Welcome to Transferable Skills. This episode is sponsored by Handily, video chat with pros on demand to conquer your home improvement DIY projects. Go to gethandily.com to start chatting with pros today. Today's guest is Marc Goldmann. You might not know Marc Goldmann directly, but you probably know him indirectly because if you're like me, you know dozens of people who found one another, their significant other, on a result of his hard work and his platform that he created and founded called Saw You at Sinai.
Thank you, Noah. As might be the case for many people, going into college, I really had no idea necessarily where I was going to end up after I graduated. But I seemed to always enjoy debating with my teachers in high school. So I figured, well, I'm good at math, I'm good at debating. Why don't I go find somebody who can combine the two of them together and learn about patent law? And I figured, this sounds fantastic. It combines law, it combines technology, it combines science. Looked like a fantastic idea for me. Didn't really spend much time thinking about it. I'd gotten in, but I did decide to apply to a number of engineering programs and attended Columbia University School of Engineering and got both a BS in industrial engineering as well as an MS in industrial engineering. But there was one key year in between getting my BS and my master's degree that changed everything. So I went through 4 years of college thinking I knew what I was doing with my life. I get out of college, decided to take off a year, travel through Europe, spend a year abroad studying in Israel. And after going through Europe and getting to Israel, I decided that after I'd taken the LSAT, send out all my applications, I don't want to be a lawyer.
How did you come to that realization that this isn't actually what you wanted to do when you had sort of set your sights on that?
I had the opportunity while I was in Israel to sit down actually with a number of patent attorneys and see what they were doing on a daily basis. Now, you might have thought, well, idiot, you should have done that much earlier in your career and seeing what they do on a regular basis, or, spend more time thinking about it. And I thought I had spoken to one very early on. I thought I got it. I understood it. It was going to be combining my science and my desire to maybe debate in a courtroom. And of course, that's not what it was. Most patent attorneys sit there over documentation, very, very detailed documentation, and get into the minutia of what the person's patent is going to be. And it's very interesting from a scientific standpoint to see what it is. But the thought of having to deal with the very small minutia of someone else's idea on a daily basis was actually not appealing to me. And from a parent's perspective, again, they wanted their son to be a lawyer at this point. They had their sights set and were all talking to their friends about it and they're all ready to go. And I was like, no, it's not going to happen.
Was their disappointment in you inversely proportionate to their excitement and enthusiasm of you going to law school?
It wasn't. I wasn't trying to not satisfy them. So there wasn't that conflict or that desire to kind of feel my oats and just go out there and just try to do my own thing. And I don't want to do what they want. It wasn't a matter of that. But if anything, it was the opposite. It was, okay, they really want me to do this. And because I respect my parents tremendously and learned tremendous amount from them. And if this is really what they wanted me to do, if anything, that influenced me to maybe stick with it longer than I might have otherwise. And so I took a few more months and we were about to get to the point now where I was start getting back results. And I actually decided, because of my relationship with my parents, I said, look, I'm pulling my applications now because if I get in, I know you're going to put a lot of pressure for me to go. So I actually pulled my applications before I ever got any results. I don't know what would have happened, where it might have gone, but I decided that was going to force my hands and force their understanding of what my desires were in life at this point, rather than afterwards and then trying to say, well, you just a couple more years, you get a nice degree. So I pulled my applications and then I had to figure out what do I want to do next. And I had no idea.
You think about, especially at that young age, whether it's high school or even into college, what it is that you want to focus on and study. A lot of times we have to make decisions before we're very fully informed on what the practice is like, the lifestyle is going to be like, or the discipline. But there are certain things that are drawing you in that direction to begin with. Like you said, you're curious about innovation and technology and the engineering side of it. That's intellectual curiosity and excitement. And then once you go through that step of meeting with two attorneys who are doing this, and you get a sense of what the practical application and day looks like, and it wasn't for you, how do you still satisfy those parts of the job that interested you then? Maybe you don't want to go into that kind of a practice or even law in general, but how do you still get some of that in your life and that fulfillment without maybe that exact job? So, what was your next thought about, well, not abandoning these curiosities and interests? I just have to shift them into a different application.
At that time, I was like, well, I'm spending a year in Israel. I don't have to worry about any of this until I'm back. To be honest with you, I had a whole year of excitement that was coming up for me to, delve into my own studies and explore land that I was looking forward to, and I didn't want to have to deal with that. So I took, I don't want to say the easy way out, but I took the path of least resistance, and that was actually get a master's degree in my specialty. It was 1 year, and it gave me the ability to stay in the area that I was very comfortable in, doing mathematical computations, mathematical analysis, thinking in a very kind of structured way. Because when you're going into engineering and overall, they're teaching you a very analytical way of thinking, how to break down a problem into smaller pieces, how to make it into a manageable component, and then put those components back together. And you want to understand each part, because if you are as efficient as possible in each part, then the overall structure you've created will be working much more efficiently kind of going forward. Now, where do I want to pivot next? Because I had no idea. I had, for the past 5-6 years, definitely through the latter part of high school into college, I figured I had my life planned out. It was all good. I didn't necessarily want to become an engineer himself, but I wanted to be able to figure out where it could not be applied. What I found out was that the management consulting firms that were out there, many of them like to take on engineers because they like their thinking. Like the fact they're very, I guess, logical, going through the process one after the other, and being able to think about the totality of the problem, breaking it down into a logical step, creatively thinking about issues. Management consultants, I like to say that it's an industry where you're a corporate doctor. You're going in there and helping them solve a problem. If there's a doctor taking care of a body, whether it's taking care of your eyes, whether it's taking care of a leg, whatever else might be, they analyze and they fix that area.
Sometimes before they even get to that point of fixing it, they're diagnosing.
Yes, you're doing preventive care. How do you avoid having the problem in the first place? How do you make sure the person's in shape? It's the same thing with a company. If you're analyzing a new opportunity, sometimes they want to have a different perspective. So they bring in management consultants to help them think through, is this a viable area to go into? What's the opportunity from a financial standpoint? What's the obstacles that they might encounter? Those are the types of activities that a typical management consultant will do, but they like the fact they thought about it very logically. It wasn't jumping from one to here to there and missing steps along the way. That's why they liked to, recruit from the engineering school. It seemed like an interesting area to be able to go into, because I'd have a lot of personal interaction with the client, a lot of constantly dealing with people and delving into potential problems, and also the excitement of going from one project to another. Part of what appealed to me as a patent attorney was the idea of looking at one idea to the next idea to the next idea. The part that did not appeal to me was writing up pages and pages of technical documentation. But the excitement of looking at one project to the next project to the next project, that was like incredibly appealing to me.
From a skills perspective, you're bringing up, project management, having to balance, manage, and orchestrate a whole bunch of different variables for one unified goal, and individuals as well. But you're also taking complex problems and you're breaking them down to systematically reach that end result. And to some degree, that's no different than business as a whole, not to oversimplify, but the reality and reason why oftentimes a business will use an outside management consulting firm is because outside perspective, sometimes you get stuck in the weeds and you forget to ask some of those critical and fundamental questions because you've been in it so long that you didn't step back from the canvas.
Correct. The key point you said at the beginning was, as a management consultant, you're going into companies that have a tremendous amount of industry knowledge in their area that they've created, and they are up to their neck in all the details and dealing with on a regular basis. And sometimes what's obvious to them, it's like, oh, it's a given. Someone comes from the outside, it's like, well, actually, that's not so obvious. And that could affect how the end user then will see it. That could affect how they're going to approach a new problem. So whether you're an engineer, whether you're a management consultant, the same idea of design thinking. How do you go ahead and design the process from beginning till the end. Define who your end users are, understand what their needs are, then identify what problem then are you helping solve for them by going into this area. And then thinking through that, prototyping it, kind of testing it through with them would be an engineering way of looking at it. Here would be, okay, if you're about to create the problem, where's going to be your primary focus in that new industry you're going into? Where's your secondary focus? What's the main problem you hope to get? How does that work with your current processes today in your own organization? How does that work in with your current business lines that you have? So those are the types of things that an engineer is doing, that also management consultant is doing, that's very helpful for somebody that is stuck in their industry knowledge and understands it to tremendous amount of depth, much better than any of the consultants coming from the outside. But we do have that fresh perspective and that approach that becomes very helpful for helping them think through the problem they have at hand. And so that commonality does apply, which was lucky for me, from engineering to management consulting. And that also helped fill that internal need, as you're asking, how do you fulfill that need that you had? That helped fill that of getting something new and exciting. Because after you might be on one client and dealing with one issue, and then the next company you're working with is a completely another area, and you have to learn something else. Still apply the methodology and the approach of analyzing a problem, but learning a new area and trying to then solve a different issue and dealing with new people as well.
Do you find yourself as an entrepreneur and visionary? Do you find yourself ending a client engagement, but kind of in your head thinking back and saying, man, I wish we could have iterated on that, or I'm still thinking about that project and I want to keep helping them push it beyond whatever the scope of work was. How do you, again, from a sort of entrepreneurial emotional state, how do you move past a client and stop thinking about them when all you want to do is improve on what you have already built for them or help them get to?
You know, there are two types of people when you're going in the business world that I've seen. People that like to do repetitive tasks and people that like to very much like to do something and move on. I actually and then like do something, move on. So I didn't have that, I guess, internal need that many people feel. That let's continue on, let's reiterate again and again and again, and each time there might be a slight incremental improvement. I've always lived by the 80-20 rule. If I've done the 80%, I don't want to spend my next few years in that 20%. I just don't have the patience to deal with that quite often, that last 20%. And there are many people that are much better because of their personalities at wringing out that perfection at the end. So the people that like doing the repetitive tasks that can then make that small incremental improvement, that after doing multiple incremental improvements, you then see the tremendous impact. But it's a much more snail's pace rather than that huge, wow, that's a change. I learned that I get bored very easily by just doing the same task again and again and just having a small change each time.
Totally. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just, your preferred model. And it's actually in line with the real reasons why you didn't pursue a career in law, is that the minutia, the details wasn't
correct.
It wasn't like your zone of genius. It wasn't like that area where you were in flow state. Like that wasn't it. And so that's the same stuff, that 80-20 rule, at the risk of diminishing returns on that 20%, it wasn't worth it. You didn't need to live in that 20%.
Correct. And by the way, and when companies become great, they are still tweaking at that 20%. So I'm not saying resolving the issues that might exist there are not very important. It's just not where I want to be spending most of my time working on it.
And it might be better suited, as you said, for somebody else to focus on that.
Correct. Because it's great to solve that, but you have to have the right personality and attention to detail to be able to then pick out where it's not working the most.
You started with this vision on law and spent a year in Israel, and then eventually, your master's, moved from that into management consulting. At what point did you say, I'm good with this, I'm done, what's next?
I was thrown a curveball 2 years into management consulting. It was a fantastic couple of years. And all of a sudden, the division I was in was going through a breakup. And the financial institutions practice was being split off by many of the partners. And some of them were leaving and some of them were staying. So I had to determine, do I want to go with the group that's leaving and forming a new firm? Or do I want to stay with the firm that I had a fantastic experience with. I chose door three, which was not either one of them in the end, because I guess when I'm forced to think about what else do I want to do, I start exploring all different options, and usually like, well, what else kind of exists out there today that might be of interest to me? And so I said, well, I've always wanted to learn more about the financial markets. I ended up having a great opportunity to join actually a hedge fund, became a analyst for them, and decided to leave the area of management consulting, but instead now have the opportunity to analyze multiple companies, look at which companies are doing well, why they're doing well, which companies are the up and comers. So you had to do all that. Plus, it gave me the opportunity to go back to more mathematical kind of base of learning mathematical modeling, learning financial modeling, which I guess fulfilled a different need within me that was not being filled in the management consulting world, where we did a lot of analytical thinking and a lot of creative solving, but we weren't doing a lot of the financial kind of modeling that I had the opportunity to do as a uh, really a hedge fund analyst for a few years there. It was a fantastic opportunity to learn the market, but I kept in touch with my colleagues from the consulting world. Opus Capital happened to then be merging back into a larger firm. And again, it seems to be the process every time there's a merger or a breakup, I then decide to look at, do I want to go with them, or do I want to also learn about something else? I still felt that was early in my career. And I decided to go look at another firm that was out there just to learn about it. And the name of the firm is Bernard Madoff Trading Company. So it became an infamous company because many, many years later, they also had an investment arm. I was actually in the trading arm.
But I assume you were giving them all the strategy advice, right?
Exactly. Of course. I was the one explaining to Bernie exactly what he should be doing in order to come up with his amazing scheme, of course. But we don't want to. No, and no. It was an interesting firm because they were the first firm to really automate the trading process. They were the largest online electronic trading platform before there was electronic trading platforms. There was the New York Stock legitimately on the trading side, and Bernie Madoff, who was the head of Madoff Investments, he was the head of the Nasdaq. He had tremendous understanding of the industry, and he was a visionary in many areas. Unfortunately, sometimes visionaries go off the path and do things that are catastrophic, not only to them, but to many people around them, which is what happened in this case.
Probably does not start off nefariously. It starts off with, I got to hedge this bet. I have to figure out how to recover from this one thing, or I have a risky concept. It didn't work out well, and I have to figure out how to salvage my reputation. And then one thing leads to another, and suddenly greed, both financial greed as well as reputation greed, and it snowballs probably pretty quickly.
I'd like to think that that's what happened because I didn't have the opportunity really to work with Bernie. We met him because he walked through the trading floor a number of times, and so everyone, it's Bernie, he's here. Everyone kind of sat up straight in their chairs and was all nervous because it's coming down from the ivory tower upstairs where he's doing his thing, and coming down to the plebeians down here that are going ahead and working on the trading and stuff like that, and everyone was always nervous at that time. But I did have the chance to work with Marc and Andrew, two of his kids that they were amazing mentors at that time in the trading area. Marc specifically was in charge. He's actually the one that interviewed me. He was the one in charge of the area that I was working in. A very, very sweet guy. And unfortunately, was deeply affected by what his father did, and unfortunately took his life. And the impact that somebody has on their family and everything else, obviously, if I'd like to think he didn't get into it for nefarious purposes in the first place. And I'm sure if anyone thought about the impact he might have had later on, maybe he would have changed his ways. But I was not in that part. But of course, everyone knows about the Madoff really Ponzi scheme that was the largest ever, still to this day, the history in trading that occurred that was catastrophic to so many people's lives, to institutions, to universities, to organizations, where their financial wealth just went up poof. I was not involved in that, but they did have a very sophisticated at that time electronic trading arm. and I learned a tremendous amount of how the markets work from the back end, from the guts. But I also realized I didn't have the personality to be a trader. It's a particular personality. It's very exciting. So from that perspective, it's like you get adrenaline pumping, but it's also you have to be a risk taker. You have to be as well and be able to have the, I guess, the intuition to know when to take those risks, when not to, when to be able to hedge it. It wasn't something I felt comfortable doing. So that was very short lived, but exciting time.
There's a lot of parallels if you watch movies that glorify the world of commerce trading and markets. They read from a screenplay standpoint very much like sports. Like it's basically the
Yep.
same
Yep.
things. So, exchange the subjects or switch them out, and it's like the same level of adrenaline of performance. And
It's a great analogy. It's a great analogy.
I've seen people burn out and
And the
sustain.
pressure there, I mean, I can't imagine the pressure. You're ninth inning and bases loaded, 2 outs in the World Series. You're about to throw a pitch, and either you're going to be the goat or you're going to be the hero coming up. And it's on a magnitude of the whole world is looking. And sometimes you're dealing with trades that the bigger they are, millions, billions, etc. And some of them work out, some of them don't, as we all know. And there is a tremendous amount of adrenaline throwing through your veins when things are going on, and things change very very quickly. A company comes out with a statement you didn't expect, and all of a sudden your position gets significantly affected. These are short. We were market makers, we were traders, we were handling at the moment, so we weren't dealing with long-term investing of 2, 3, 4 years type of thing, 5 years, 10 years. We were dealing with what's going on by the end of the day. So if you have a position and you're a market maker and you don't want to have exposure by the end of the day, and all of a sudden the midday you do have a position, how is that going to be affected, and how do you handle it? And it changes very very quickly.
I don't even know how traders on the floor, go to the bathroom. I don't know how you can distract
Right.
yourself or shift your attention for a moment without worrying about what it is that you don't know, what your eyes are not
Yep.
on.
Yeah. So it's fast paced. It's exciting. There's a lot of adrenaline, a lot of stuff going on, but it was not for me. So I took a pivot yet again, but this pivot brought me backwards.
What year was this transition?
Probably 1996 at this point. They went back into the consulting area again. And specifically, I was brought on board because they said, hey, you understand the consulting world. You also have financial understanding as well. We need to financially model how this company is going to work. So for them, it was like a great opportunity to bring someone on that had a slightly different background than the typical consultants. Typical consultants do not know how to do financial modeling. Obviously, they could have brought in an accountant, but accountants can't think about how do you go ahead and uh, it's not just can I lay out a financial sheet. It's where do I want to focus my efforts in order to make the money. So it was more of a it was more of a CFO role than it was an accountant role, because the CFO has to think about how do you do it financially from a strategic standpoint. What reporting do you need? What areas might make a financial sense to go into? And that's what they were trying to come up with before they ever went into the industry in the first place. And that was the area I was asked to come in for, and that was very exciting because it was well beyond my age and my pay grade, because I just had this skill set now that they needed, and they didn't have anybody else internally. So I went back being the financial modeling and to be able to do the reporting, yet also think about uh, how can you look at the new areas they want to go into and model the opportunity to its greatest degree.
So from that standpoint, how much of your analysis, forecasting, and modeling is your responsibility to do outside research and market research to understand things that are not internal to like the business model itself and integral, but rather how it's affected by the market outside?
There was significant amount of doing that. They Part of what we needed to do was run their marketing programs. Their marketing programs were in the hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The way that we would be compensated, though, would be different than the way they typically look at it, which is what does a credit card company end they want when they're marketing? They're looking at the end result. The end result is how do we go ahead and get a new client? How do we get a new credit card account opened up? So rather than saying, okay, I'll spend X amount of dollars on a program, we were now going to deliver based on how many accounts we could deliver to them.
So how long were you there in that position?
we did this. I did this actually for 4 years. The main group I was working with formed a new firm called Zborg, which was another consulting firm that specifically was focusing on software because now things are moving. It's the year 2000. Things are really starting to take off now. Phones are changing from just a simple flip phone to now you're actually having screens to be able to work on the screens. You have a Palm Pilot, which was considered huge at that time. If you can go back enough years, and then you're just starting to get iPhones, and so all that's now starting to change.
Sometimes our skills at work aren't always transferable at home. I often find myself in the middle of a home improvement project and realize I'm in way over my head. I might have great DIY ideas, but don't always know where to start. And sometimes I'm just not sure if it's going to end up being a small problem or a tremendous problem, or how much it might cost me to fix that problem. Well, that's the sweet spot for people like me using Handily. It's the perfect solution for homeowners who might not have all the skills needed for every task. Handily allows you to video chat with home improvement pros on demand. You can connect with trustworthy general contractors and plumbers, electricians, or HVAC pros who can guide you through your project and problems right from the comfort of your own home. I had a hole in my bathroom ceiling for the past year, literally, because I couldn't figure out where the leak was coming from. And it was the perfect opportunity for me to use my Phone a Pro Lifeline and get some expert eyes on the problem. Head over to gethandily.com and book a session now. And here's a special offer for all you listeners of the Transferable Skills podcast. Get your first 15-minute Handily session free by using coupon code MADSKILLS at checkout. Don't let a lack of skills hold you back. Get expert help with Handily. You have moved your career from the 90s into the 2000s. You're now in the digital era, combining quant, finance, software, dynamics in this digital era. Would you say that you've had a pretty successful career and you're doing pretty well?
I guess it depends how you define are you doing pretty well.
Do you feel successful, that you're good at this and that you've got a pretty robust career full of skills and opportunity ahead of you?
Well, I still had enough, I guess, guts to be able to try something new.
Yeah.
I in no way did I feel confident that I had mastered any one area, and that's the downfall of being a consultant quite often, that you don't spend 20 years in one area. You spend 6 months or a year in one area and then move on. But it gives you a tremendous overview of the entire process from beginning till the end. And all the areas that you just mentioned, Noah, were exactly what the types of things I was being exposed to, whether it was financial side, whether it was the marketing side, whether it was problem solving, whether it was operations, whether it was operations from manufacturing side. Now that we're moving more into the software area, where software is taking how does the online platforms work, how does technology work in. So it gave me a very broad understanding of many, many different areas, but I didn't have the confidence that I had, top expertise in one area. If you're a doctor that's gone through years and years of training and then do research and you're on cutting edge, you have a tremendous amount of in-depth understanding of one area and you're the master of that area. I did not feel I was master of that area, but I did feel like I had a good base across the entire way of a company would work, which allowed me to go to the next phase.
Wait, you're more like a generalist here, as opposed to a specialist. And
Correct.
let's say, at least by your characterization, lacking industry expertise over the course of an entire career. But I think that is the message here. It's not about the industry expertise per se, but rather
Correct.
the intradisciplines, the skills that you are transitioning from one to the next.
And building on each time,
Yeah.
and building on each time, because
For sure.
That's really important. How do they interact with each other? And if there was no way for me ever to have predicted the software evolution that started taking place back in the early 2000s. Like when I was first entering the marketplace, it really was a complete change when they were starting to use the internet for all these types of applications. But I happened to be in an environment that I was able to then quickly learn that and understand how it was being applied. But if I was going back to high school and into college, I couldn't have said, "Oh yeah, I want to go ahead and go into software there and be able to do that." It's not an industry that really even existed at that time, so I couldn't have envisioned doing that. But I did build up the skill sets necessary to be able to then take advantage of the opportunity when it came, and then decide, okay, how will I then apply that to an area that maybe is more meaningful to me. And that's really what also changed at this time. I had been through many, many different opportunities back and forth. As you see, to my parents, this was like an unheard of kind of career path. My father is an oral surgeon. He is in one area his entire career. He has
Yeah.
been is in his own area. I had literally jumped around every 3 to 4 years. At max, I'd gone to a new opportunity, and for me, that was
Was that unsettling to your parents?
very much so. Very much so. It's like, oh, you're doing it again? What do you mean? Like, are you destroying yourself by doing this? And to me, it was like, no, that's kind of the way it works. That if things are changing so fast, that you just keep yourself in one area, that might be okay, but it's a risk reward. I want to learn about new things. I want to go out there and try to do that. So for me, that was okay. I still felt I was young enough. I was a single guy exploring the world, and it was a great opportunity to be able to just learn. And I was like, okay, I'll settle down into one area if I need to and learn 20 years of one area if that's where it's going to be later on. Right now, I want to continue doing that. But I was getting tired because I still was running around. Even when I was in software working with Xerox, Xerox was located up in Rochester, New York, and so I was constantly traveling back and forth to a very cold region in New York. And I was deciding that I actually wanted to start settling down and getting married, hopefully starting a family at this point. And so the life of a road warrior was not as appealing anymore. Whereas it was unbelievably exciting when I first started. Now it was getting tiring and making it was almost an obstacle to get into any real personal relationship.
And the common thing with every single transition you have made in your career, it has always been, I've done this and now I'm moving on because an opportunity is ahead of me that I'm going to move
Correct.
into. But this one is
Correct.
different. You're leaving this great role, this great experience, and
And there was a great opportunity actually at Xerox, and I could have continued there. I ended up staying on board with them and helping them during the transition. When we were going through the process of setting up the platform for Xerox, a good friend of mine at the firm was actively dating online and recommending that I go online to start looking for a potential partner as well. Because when you're traveling all over the place, it's not easy just necessarily to meet somebody wherever you're going, especially if you're looking at a small segment of the overall population. So maybe use technology as we're using technology, using software to helping Xerox use software to help my dating life. I took a look at what was out there at that time, said, interesting, but not for me.
why not?
I was more private than what was out there today. So at that time, we were in the early stages of online dating, and privacy still was for many people. I don't want to put all my information out there. I was a lot of people knew who I was within the Jewish community. One, I'm 6'6", so even if they didn't know who I was, they knew who I was because my head was always above almost everybody else whenever I was walking within a crowd. So therefore, everyone knew who I was, even if they didn't personally know me. Therefore, I had no desire to go ahead and go on a platform where I'm like, oh yeah, I just saw him in synagogue the other day, so it
Yeah.
was not for me.
You
But I
wanted
did
the
want to
ability to be represented with, limited kind of transparency into who
exposure,
you are.
exposure,
Exposure is a
yeah,
great word. Yeah.
limited exposure. So I then, as a nerd would do, I went ahead and listed the most common ways that I or others meet people. What was the advantages of meeting someone in a synagogue? What was the advantage of meeting someone through a matchmaker? What was the advantage of meeting someone through a friend? And literally, I went through every way and then laid out the positives and negatives of each one.
And I assume that you're going
Very,
to supply this transparent list to our entire audience here. Marc's dating
you know,
habits.
you want to know something? I actually might be able to find you the nerdy list. All right, we got it. I guess I'm more organized than I think. Just to give you an idea, the last time I edited the file was 3/18/2004.
What is your file
So,
called? I'm curious.
well, this is industry slides because I knew what it's in a subfolder called startup files.
Okay.
So so it was under startup files and then industry slides. I went ahead and laid out on a piece of paper the positives and negatives of every way that I date. I realized the way I met the most people was at Shabbat or Sabbath meals, after synagogues, bars and clubs, community charity events set up by a friend. Those are the ways that I was meeting somebody.
Sort of organically, you run into somebody, you're introduced in a social gathering, and that's where you meet
Or
people.
yeah, yeah, correct. So that was the way that it was being done. So I said, okay, well, what are the advantages of each one of these? So at that point, I said, well, if I meet a Sabbath meal, there's a valid point of reference there, right? I have my friend there. I can go ahead and ask them. Where if I went ahead and just met at a bar, there's zero point of reference there, other than they happen to be at the same bar that I was at. So that's a negative. So I would go through each one of these. Easy follow up. Well, at a setup by a friend, let's say easy follow up. Going to let's say a large community event that might have the whole community, well, much harder to. And I went through each one of the positives and negatives. Is there a large enough pool? Well, if I'm going to a Sabbath meal, there might only be 10 people there. If I go to a very large event, well, there's an advantage there now to the large event because there's a lot of people there I potentially can meet.
But you probably also have the lower quality of engagement at those.
Exactly. But so that's the trade-off between one thing and the other, right? It's not that one way is better than the other necessarily, but one gives you a different type of opportunity to meet than the other one. And that was one way of looking at things. Then I said, okay, well, let's look at the challenges a little bit more, and let's see if I can go ahead and combine different ways of doing things to be able to make it better than what it is today. So look at the advantages, look at disadvantages of each one, saying what combination would apply and what is taking place in the marketplace today that I have not been taking advantage of. And that's where it got back into what my friend was looking at. I looked at the Sabbath meals, the charity events, the bars and clubs being set up by friends, and said, okay, well, how about online dating? Now let's take it a step further. Set up by friends. Let's say I didn't use a friend setting up, but it was more because I did use some matchmakers infrequently at that time. Let's say I used a matchmaker who are typically volunteers within the community that just want to help people meet. So it's not someone that knows me personally, but is someone that who's motivated by trying to help others and help them set up. And what can I combine together to be able to do something?
Is there a noticeable difference? Maybe it may vary by individual, but is there like a social risk or insecurity after a Sabbath meal or a social setting, and you follow up with your friend to say, "Hey, tell me about that person. I'm kind of interested," versus going to somebody that's an objective third party as a matchmaker? You personally speaking, and does this maybe define a segment of the audience that would prefer one over the other?
The answer is yes. Obviously, if some people are not confident enough to ask their friend to do that for fear of rejection, for fear of having then to deal with the person at the next meal, there's definitely that.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody because obviously that can be awkward, especially if you're with a small group of friends and you know you're going to see that person every day. You have to be able to deal with the fact that you might be interested, the other person might not be interested, and vice versa. And you have to be able to deal with that, and that's part of life. So obviously, if you're going to actively use that as a way to date, dating actively and repeatedly within your own friend pool is potentially a way to reduce the number of friends you have if you keep breaking up. So that's obviously a way to reduce. If you're interested in reducing the number of friends, that's a fantastically efficient way to do it. Online dating had no valid point of reference. That was my opinion. One, that if you didn't necessarily know who their friends were at that time, you had no way of knowing anything confidently about them.
So it wasn't like a trusted referral network.
Exactly. It was much more Wild West.
If you go to a conference, you have the overarching theme for the conference, and then you probably have the keynote main stage. But there's breakout sessions, and those are all subject to fine. And it's like,
Yep.
okay, who wants to hear about this subject or this sub subject? Suddenly, you're in a room full of people that have common interests, and it's
You self-filtered. In your case, you're describing. So I ended up analyzing all the ways I dated. I then added on by overlay. Is there a way to take advantage of the way that my friend said online dating was effective, and also realized that by combining the friend approach with the online dating approach, where my friend was the matchmaker, I potentially could have a superior approach to what was out there today. To give you examples, no valid point of reference online dating, have valid point of reference with matchmaker. The ability to gauge another person's interest after conversing online a little bit, well, I have a matchmaker that can clearly give me feedback about that. Intentions and context. Online dating might have somebody that just wants a one night stands, and somebody else that wants maybe just a relationship, and you have somebody else that wants to get married. So it's clear we can identify those interests much easier when you have somebody like a friend or a matchmaker involved. A person's information being verified. That was huge, huge. When I spoke to people, that was probably number one reasons why people were not going online, besides the area of exposing their information and making themselves available online, was they didn't feel confident that all the information they were getting was accurate. Well, if you have a friend or a matchmaker kind of looking that over, you're able to verify that. Intermediary to give feedback or assistance if desired. You'd be surprised how we've seen over the years that the most accomplished individual sometimes is clueless when it comes to the dating process itself. And that could either be upfront while they're dating, or the little nuances they should be doing while they're going through the dating process. Whether it's a dating coach or a matchmaker, that can be helpful at times. If they don't want it, they didn't have to have it once they're dating, but that can be helpful. And finally, is there a structured environment or is it an informal environment? So if you're going to an event, you don't know if people are there to meet somebody. Is it really for dating, or is it all just to be, oh, let's have a giant event together? Both online dating and matchmaking had that. If you're being set up, it's a structured environment to go out. And you didn't necessarily know the intention, but clearly they're there to meet somebody. What do they want to do with that? Well, that was some of the challenges of online dating. So I laid out a chart specifically overlaying then the matchmaking advantages, disadvantages, and realized that most matchmakers did not have a large pool of people. And that was one of the biggest advantages of online dating. One of the number one advantages of online dating was you have a very large pool of people. If you can then have a way, though, of taking that large pool of people and having some way to filter out who would be most appropriate to you, that would solve, to me, a tremendous problem of the randomness that was existing in the online dating world. And the challenge of using a typical offline matchmaker was, you have all these great things on paper, but is there going to be any chemistry when I walk in that door, even the basic chemistry there? And that was taken away if using the online platforms. You can get an initial feel, oh, okay, there's some attraction there, and you're saying some amazing things about that person, so let's go for it. Let's try it out. It's worth a conversation and a date. So combine them together.
Somebody who is very math, objective, quantifiably focused. How do you accurately quantify a subjective trait or characteristic of an individual to help filter? How do you quantify an emotional state?
So how we do that today is very different than how we did it when we started off, because things are changing very quickly with AI today. But let's go back to starting it off. Is this a business I want to try to, or a problem I want to try to solve? So I think which is part of what you're getting to, which was, I decided, yes, it is. It's something that would help me, because I was single at the time, would help my friends, and to me would help the community, in that there were people struggling to find someone to marry. I decided that I was going to take the talents that I had in software development and creating and solving of problems and combining that together to form my own company. I started analyzing, okay, what are all the steps now in launching this company? How do I go ahead and set up the software? How do I define that software in a way to be able to give over to the programmers? So it's taking the business logic and giving it to the programmers. Good news, I just did that at Zborg, so very applicable. How do I set the financials? How am I going to market it? Very, very challenging. So literally all the skill sets I developed over the years of analyzing a marketplace, looking at the financials, were exactly the types of skills that were very advantageous when I was setting up a new company. So I decided to take on this challenge as a goodwill gesture to the community. It was be a 2-year hiatus. Fast forward 20 years later, I'm still on that 2-year hiatus. On May 8th, 2003, I decided that I was officially going to do this project. On May 8th, 2003, I went on a blind date with my wife.
Holy cow. That is wild.
Okay, not a day later, not a day before. I contacted a matchmaker named Tova Weinberg that day, notifying her I'm moving forward with the project, and I'd like to sit down and work with you on it. That was May 2003. I contacted her. I'm committed to doing this project. And May 8th, 2003, a friend of mine was my matchmaker and set me up. By the time I ended up launching the company 6 months later, we had been dating for 6 months. So I was not going to be, there's a men's hair commercial. I'm not only the president, but I'm also a user. I always envisioned myself to be able to say that about my company. I was looking forward to it. I'm a user. I know how it is. And I was not able to say that because literally the day that I started the project, I met her, and thank God, very happy, happily married, 4 kids later, all amazing. But I decided to continue with the project. We launched it. I solved the problems that I had laid out and launched the project in December 15th of 2003. It was a large enough need in the marketplace that 1 month later we went out of beta. So it only took us 1 month to build a critical mass of people to go from beta to fully launched. I then had to apply my, skill sets to how do I take an idea that now clearly is addressing a need. I thought it had a need, but until you get it to the marketplace, you never know. You might feel you're solving something, but the marketplace, you hear the crickets and no one's coming, and it's a great idea that then closes up, the way many online companies end up doing.
What was your marketing strategy? Or maybe you didn't even have one. 2003, how were you spreading that word?
What I used was our biggest asset are the matchmakers. Those are the ones that understand the people. Those are the ones that have the relationship with the people.
They become brand ambassadors.
They become brand ambassadors because if I can help them be more successful, I view myself as a tool for their success. Soy with Sinai is a tool for the matchmaker's success. That's what we are. We're the platform, we're the organizational tools, we're the algorithms that allow the matchmakers to make more matches. And so they valued us because they saw us the ability to help organize all the information, help keep everything up to date. One of their biggest challenges was, great, I spoke to somebody today, but is that information accurate a month from now? Maybe I've moved, maybe I changed phones, maybe religiously I stand differently than what I was. Things change in life. I'm in a new job. Whatever it might be, things constantly change. So I helped solve that problem for them because they didn't have to constantly chase after somebody for information. Maybe I'm dating. I don't want to waste my time as a matchmaker thinking through an idea only to find out the person is already dating. We were able to solve a lot of problems for the matchmakers. So they were really excited about getting on board if they understood they had an issue. And that was a key point. Many of the matchmakers I went to day one did not call me back. But I had a few very large ones who were overwhelmed with data that they couldn't handle and were getting frustrated by exactly the things I just laid out of people already dating, not being updated, not having their latest phone number, having to track them down. They were completely overwhelmed with this, that there were a few that got it, that helped me get going and helped spread the word very quickly. Tova Weinberg, who I'm tremendously thankful for, who I want to give a clear Hakarata Tov, a feeling of appreciation towards her, because she was one of the key people that helped me get a lot of people on board. She was a well-known matchmaker that put her name on the line to help us get going. And there were a few other matchmakers like that gave us a nice influx of people because they valued the service we were giving to them. Because we have two customers. We have the single and we have the matchmaker. And we have to be delivering value to both sides. Well, one of our customers we showed the value to right off the bat. And so they brought their people on board very quickly. And that's how we were able to create a base very quickly and solve one of the biggest obstacles when getting online, which is how do you get new people to add on to your base of people.
The overly simplified answer to that is always make something so obviously valuable that you can't ignore it.
Correct.
And if you have to convince someone to use a platform, or you have to try to resell them constantly on the value, well, then it's not either a good product or you haven't marketed it well. But if you make it so intrinsic to their methodology, their practice, that you can't ignore it.
You had asked me earlier, how do you go ahead and solve the problem of identifying something that might be emotional, might be based on decisions that even the person doesn't understand? Let's understand, why are they saying they want all these things if that's not what it is? One of the crazy criteria I had was I wanted to date somebody who was an avid skier, snow skier like myself. Well, if I tell you how many times we've gone skiing together in my lifetime, it's since we got married in 20 years, it's frequent to none times per year. But I was an avid skier at the time. I was spending 20, 25 days a year skiing at times. And I raced in college. So I wanted somebody that's going to go with this excitement with me. But it wasn't something that was really necessary and needed.
Because that wasn't your goal. Your goal Correct. Wasn't to marry an avid skier. Your goal, because those are not the true, values in life. You weren't looking to
Correct.
grow with and die with a skier. You just needed that entry point as far as to get over the hurdles of the initial getting to know you, commonality and conversation. And having those points makes it easier to get to know someone.
Correct.
Whether you ski ever
Correct.
again together is almost irrelevant. It's just getting into that, past the threshold.
Well, it has to be somebody that's okay with me skiing a lot. It has so if you have to break down the reasons behind it rather than saying, "I want a skier." Well, if I eliminate only people who are skiers, well, that takes care of a lot of different people.
Right.
Talking to somebody about that can then change what you're looking for. So I'm not saying, "No, don't take this." I'm saying, "Well, why do you want a skier?"
You're looking for someone that can relate to you and understand you.
Correct.
She might not ever ski again, but she certainly knows why you need to.
And those are the types of things that having somebody involved in the dating process quite often can be very helpful
Correct.
because they can then help you identify the true things you're looking for rather than the things you're telling me you're looking for.
Well, that's why when you're talking about your skill set in building this out, you're looking at it from as opposed to the end result of the goal of, well, if 1 + 1 is 2. So people are looking at how do I get to 2? And they're looking at it as one
Correct.
plus one. You're saying, no, there's many ways to get there.
Correct.
0.5 times 4. The point is, how can I find those variables that gets me to the end result that is uniquely important to that individual?
Correct. People might have long lists, then helping them filter through that list to determine what's really important to them over time. As they say, "Oh, I'm very picky." Well, are you really picky? Let's determine what's going on here, and then determine maybe you are. Okay, everyone's picky about something, so you just have to figure out what are your key really deals and or no deal. Obviously, world is changing very very quickly today. With artificial intelligence, the way that people can identify opportunities are also changing. And the interesting part that has occurred to us was there are sometimes correlations in responses that might not be obvious to a human being. But with the artificial intelligence, they can start to make those correlations much easier behind the scenes and take hundreds of different data points and then come up with suggestions that would just take too long for anyone to go through themselves. So we're now starting to include artificial intelligence to assist the matchmakers in making a better decision as far as who they should be suggesting out to people. So my 2-year plan has gone to 20 years. It turned into a major project that's had over 4,600 engagements to date over these 20 years. And we expanded to service the entire Jewish population all over the world in Hebrew, English, Spanish, French, and just allowing people to go ahead and use a platform to find people around the world. We've had people from California to Australia get engaged. We recently had someone from Spain and Argentina get engaged. So that's on the Spanish platform. So the obstacles, of course, of going to the local bar, well, they weren't going to meet those people. We've created a platform that has now allowed, if someone's looking for a Jewish spouse, they can go ahead and come online, find somebody whether they're 18, whether in their 60s. We're able to go ahead and service them across the board.
That is wild. What an incredible journey. You like many entrepreneurs, you founded a business based on your own personal needs. And there's nothing more personal than finding your spouse. And I can see a direct correlation. Oftentimes somebody comes from industry experience and therefore they found a business that they understand the market, they understand the need. You came in from a personal perspective and you also, no pun intended, you married that with your skill set of financial forecasting, planning, analysis, quantitative background to approach dating in a way that would be much more personalized and meaningful than somebody might come from just a subjective product development standpoint. And I think that that's something I would never have foreseen or planned, but that's exactly the point of all this. And it's a beautiful way to see the journey throughout your career. It's just an incredible one. And I really appreciate you taking us through that.
My pleasure. I don't think if I would have told my parents back in 1993, well, I'm not going to become a lawyer, but I will go ahead and start a company that helps people get married, they would have looked at me like I'm from a different planet. And it honestly, it didn't exist then. The opportunity to do that did not exist then.
Well, that's a perfect example of timing is part. There's luck, there's planning and knowledge, but there's also timing. You could not have done what you did in 1993, 1996, in 2002, maybe not even still. 2003, you were on the cusp
Correct.
of the real next stage of the internet.
Yep.
And to have a more visual representation and engagement and a user experience that led us to 2.0 and to 3.0. Had you tried that earlier, you may have failed just because of the lack of support within the technology. and therefore been dissuaded and not pursued this. But the timing was perfect for you. You leveraged your background, and that's pretty wild and inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you.
Marc, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate giving us all your time. Very generous of you, and thank you for sharing with everybody.
My pleasure. Been a great speaking with you.
Thank you to Jason Silver for recommending Marc as today's guest, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, if you found value in today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with your friends and network. Your support helps us reach more people who could benefit from these stories. Transferable Skills is produced by Cackle Media and music by Cost Monkey. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, Handily. Your support makes this podcast possible. So head over to gethandily.com to video chat with pros on demand for expert advice on your home DIY projects. And don't forget to use coupon code MADSKILLS to get your first 15-minute session free. For more resources and inspiration on leveraging your skills for a successful career transition, visit our website at www.cacklemedia.com. Follow us on social platforms at Cackle Media for updates and join our community of listeners who are all about embracing change and growth. If you have any questions, feedback, or want to share your own career pivot story, email us at skills@cacklemedia.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.